Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ken Tenser, CEO of Spiderworks and the chair of your Mississauga Board of Trade. It's our great pleasure to have you join us this afternoon for our virtual town hall with the Honorable Lisa MacLeod, Ontario's Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. You know, there's something very special about cheering on your favorite sports team surrounded by thousands of other fans, or quietly taking a piece of art in a gallery, or being transfixed by a powerful soliloquy on stage. And as we return to better times, I, for one, am looking forward to these shared moments as a part of our all rediscovering normal. There's no doubt that the industry sectors Minister MacLeod represents have been some of the hardest hit as a result of the COVID pandemic. She has worked tirelessly to advocate for support of these sectors and to build a new vision for tourism in Ontario. Before we officially introduce Minister MacLeod, I'd like to take a few minutes to thank Tourism Mississauga for their continued support and for being our sponsor for today's event. And now I'd also like to review the virtual event protocols for today's event. All attendees will remain on mute as we are recording the event. A Q&A session will occur after the minister addresses the audience. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to enter in your question. Questions will only be visible to MBOT staff and panelists. MBOT staff will review all questions that are asked, and Brad will do his best to have as many of your questions answered by the minister. Now, to officially introduce the minister today and to say a few words, please welcome the CEO of Tourism Mississauga, Victoria Clark.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Ken, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this webinar and this discussion with Minister MacLeod this afternoon. As Ken said, I'm Victoria Clark. I am your new CEO of Tourism Mississauga, and I couldn't be more happy to take on this role. And I'm excited to join the team and looking forward to moving back home to my hometown of Georgetown, Ontario, and of Mississauga. As I move back to Ontario, I've spent the last number of years as a CEO of Discover St. John here in St. John, New Brunswick. Established last year in 2020, Tourism Mississauga is the official destination marketing organization for the city of Mississauga. The organization is industry-led and is responsible for developing a tourism strategy and leading tourism marketing and development efforts for our destination. With a mandate of implementing the City of Mississauga's Tourism Master Plan, Tourism Mississauga is committed to promoting local businesses, driving tourism, and attracting businesses and sporting events, and overall promoting everything that our great city has to offer. As we enter these new phases of reopening in Ontario, Tourism Mississauga will be leading the change in raising awareness and positioning Mississauga as a destination for all types of visitors from business, sport, and leisure, and to facilitate a high level of collaboration among the local tourism industry with business associations and sector lead partners. Tourism Mississauga is here to support the local tourism sector into our recovery, and we look forward to launching a series of programs and campaigns and services to help us all rebuild the visitor economy. Specifically, one initiative that we're really proud of is our hashtag Mississauga Made, a support local campaign, which was launched in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in an effort to promote our local businesses and encourage our residents to support our local communities. It's a free online marketplace and it's open to all local businesses and business categories. And we will continue to promote MississaugaMade.ca through our recovery efforts and into the future as we start to get back to a new normal. Our team at Tourism Mississauga works very closely with the City of Mississauga Economic Development Office, and we welcome any and all opportunities to work with you and your teams to continue to build up our city locally, and will support with support of all levels of government and all recovery programs towards a brighter future for tourism in Mississauga, across Ontario, and throughout Canada. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Lisa MacLeod, the Ontario Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries. A native of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, another maritimer, the minister attended St. Francis Xavier University, where she obtained a BA honors degree and completed her master's level coursework in strategic intelligence at American Military University in Virginia. As an opposition member elected in 2006, 2007, 2011, and 2014, she was able to receive all party support in numerous occasions for important initiatives such as the Queen's Park Family Friendly, including such things as making Queen's Park family friendly, Rowan's Law, Canada's first concussion legislation, Lebanese Heritage Month, and Trans Day of Remembrance. A supporter of equal voice for many years, Minister MacLeod was instrumental in the groundbreaking Daughters of the Vote initiative, which brought 338 young women to Parliament Hill during Canada's 150th. For that work, she was awarded the 2018 EVE Award for the advancement of women in politics alongside Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Please join me in welcoming Minister Lisa MacLeod.
Thanks so much, Victoria, for that kind introduction, and best wishes as you become the new CEO for Mississauga Tourism. I know you're going to do a great job because if there's one thing we know about Atlantic Canadians, as I do, they take their tourism really seriously. So I always love when we get people from the Maritimes working in Ontario for tourism, because that means we're going to have that great advantage, and that's going to be fantastic. So good luck. I look forward to seeing you in person this summer to formally congratulate you and to take in some of the great destinations that Mississauga has to offer. And I'm very excited about that. I also wanted to say thanks to Ken as well as to Brad Butt for making sure that I always have the opportunity to work with all of you and to talk about some of the important things that are going on in Mississauga and around the province. Now, many of you may have been with me in person on March the 10th, 2020, 2 days before the WHO declared the pandemic, that COVID-19 was going to actually be far worse than we thought it would be in terms of the healthcare crisis, and of course the evolving economic, and then of course the ensuing social crisis that it was. And when we were there that day, we didn't quite know we would be in this for over a year and a half. And so I think it's appropriate that on the first event with the Board of Trade that I've had since being reconfirmed on Friday as the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, that I'm here with you. I think it's a perfect bookend to what I believe and I hope to have a very, very good summer across the province for all of the sectors that I represent. So I think that this first address is very important for me. And I think it is really great. And I just wanted to say, you know, many of you have been working hard throughout this pandemic to try to find some level of normalcy for you and your staff, for your customers, and for your families. And so I want to thank you for your patience and your dedication to the important social and economic bottom line that you represent in the sectors that are aligned with this ministry. I think it goes without saying that our sectors were hit first, we were hit hardest, and as evidenced by the ongoing pandemic, which has lasted longer than SARS, the global economic recession, and 9/11 together will take the longest to recover. And that's certainly where we are at this particular point. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, we've got that triple threat. First, we were shuttered because of the healthcare crisis. We're high touch, high volume experiences, whether it's in heritage, sport, tourism, or culture industries. We were hit deepest simply because of the employments and being shuttered, and that has taken us a great deal of time. And we will take the longest to recover, and we will take the longest to recover, obviously, because we are shuttered because of healthcare conditions. Then we had an ensuing economic crisis that has hampered our ability to continue to operate. And finally, even as we start to look at step 2 and step 3 over the course of the summer, we will still have to contend with the societal changes as well as consumer sentiments and behaviors that have changed dramatically during this pandemic. And I want you to know that this ministry, and myself in particular, have been very focused on looking at the evidence, not only from jurisdictions around the world, but in terms of public opinion polling, looking at what people would be amenable to going back to early and what they're still concerned about. And so we know we have a lot of work to do, ensuring that kids can get back into the sports that they like to play, and parents having that comfort level. Ensuring that when we get back to a scenario where live music and live sporting events are back on the agenda, that people will want to be those fans in the stands. We have seen a light of hope there as well. We also know that when it comes time to start touring across Ontario and welcoming tourists into our communities, there's some work to be done there as well. But we're going to continue to work with industry and our sectoral leaders to ensure that we have vibrant success. And I'll just, before I go on to the sort of the meat of what we've been able to accomplish over the last little while and what our plans are, I'm also heartened to see that Mississauga is very interested in making it a film-friendly location by building a studio. I know that there are a number of different films and television productions that have taken place in Mississauga, but I'm very heartened to talk to you about the soundstage that Deepak Anand, my colleague, is very interested in seeing move forward. Of course, I want to congratulate Khalid Rashid and Nina Tangri both for becoming cabinet ministers on Friday. I had the opportunity to speak with Khalid earlier today about his work as the minister responsible for digital government. And of course, that's going to be very important in the work that I do because we do have interactive and digital media within this ministry. Nina is also taking on a big role with red tape reduction. And of course, so many of the small businesses that we represent really rely on an efficient and effective government. So we'll continue to work with her. And I also want to congratulate my parliamentary assistant, Sharif Sabawi, for his continued efforts. And of course, Natalia Kuznedova, who has not only been an MPP during this time, but has worked on the front lines as a nurse and really is a frontline hero. And I think you've got a very strong group of people that represent you at Queen's Park and Mississauga, and they certainly have my ear and have been very boastful about what Mississauga can accomplish. So I wanted to thank all of you for making sure that you sent strong voices to Queen's Park. Since the pandemic hit, and of course our sectors were shuttered effectively on the 12th and 13th of March 2020, and many have been for the past 16 months, if not longer, we were able to roll out the Ontario Music Investment Fund, a $7 million matching funds with the industry. We retooled it to get into the emerging artists that we know we can support and get out there to do great things. We added an additional $2 million to the Unison Benevolent Fund to support musicians who have been out of work for that period of 16 months, either to support their mental health efforts or to support other items like their rent or their heat and hydro. And that I think went a long way. It was the first time government's ever provided support to the Unison Benevolent Fund. We provided another $500,000 to the Canadian Live Music Association to build out a strategy for music cities over the next year and a bit. And that will do two things. One, it will inject some interest into our live music sector, which is vibrant, as you know. The second, though, however, is to make sure that we fully integrate them into our tourism strategy. We tripled the Tourism Economic Development Recovery Fund from $500,000 to $1.5 million, and we built out a digital strategy for arts and culture, as well as sport and tourism on Ontario.live. We retooled our $20 million festivals events fund, which was called Celebrate Ontario, to reconnect Ontario. And we were pleased to support several $100,000 worth of festivals and events in Mississauga. And we also led, for a tourism ministry, a campaign that said, stay home, stay safe, and save lives this past January, which became one of the government's most successful organic marketing programs. In addition, through the pandemic, I was able to invest $66 million into our iconic institutions, $25 million to our core arts organizations, and an additional $10 million into our arts programs. We have a $100 million tourism recovery fund that's run through our ministry, and through economic development, we have a $100 million small business grant for tourism. We also have, through the Ontario Trillium Foundation, an additional $105 million for sports, culture, and recreation, and $15 million we spent for sport, in addition to $14 million in terms of hyper-local marketing. I've been, of course, a vocal member of the Jobs and Recovery Committee of cabinet, one that's very important to the high touch sectors that we have. If you can imagine, if there are 30 sectors that have been shut down entirely, about 24 of those sectors are aligned with this ministry. So we've been quite busy behind the scenes working with the Chief Medical Officer of Health, as well as our Jobs and Recovery Committee, in trying to get sports and recreation and tourism and arts and culture, galleries, museums, and all of those types of things back up and running. And I'm also on the essential business committee list, essential business list committee of cabinet, and hopefully we won't need to go back to that. Right now, the ministry is working on a 5-year plan. We have engaged Tim Hudak, a former tourism minister, to lead a tourism task force recovery. Tourism Recovery Task Force will be reporting out this week, and I'm excited that there's some really relevant things that will support Mississauga and the entire GTA. We also have a restaurant working group to see how we can best support our restaurants on a go-forward basis, how we can modernize the customer experience while at the same time reducing red tape and streamlining the work that they do. We've been working with our amusement and water park groups, as well as our tour boat operators, to see how we can get them most effectively back into the game. And hopefully I'll be able to announce some regulatory changes this week to get them into a great space. We are also working with video gaming across the province. We believe that's going to be an area where we'll be able to create more jobs in the cultural industries and sectors. So there is a lot going on. And in the first week of the first week of July, I'll be back on the road for a 10-week tour, supporting hyper-local tourism and making sure that we continue to support the gateway cities in Ontario, which we classify as Ottawa and, of course, Toronto, including Mississauga and Brampton, given your airport and all of the cultural assets that you obtain, but also the ability for us to reignite passion in soccer and football and all of the other sports combined, and cricket, that are going to be really important for economic recovery and renewal. And so we'll be having some very specific ideas that are coming from the task force, but we'll even have throughout this summer even more specific recovery plans for the next 5 years as the heritage, sport, tourism, and culture industries start to recover. Again, wanted to say a special thanks to Brad Butt for always making sure that we're included in sort of the programming that you have here, so that we can have a candid conversation about our sectors. And obviously, I wanted to really wish Victoria well. I know it's a tense time. It's tough to be a tourism minister or a president or CEO of a tourism agency during this time. That said, I learned at the very beginning of this pandemic, we must continue to plan for our recovery. And if we plan for our recovery and we leverage each other's assets and we really focus on a hyper-local product, I think we will recover sooner than other areas. And that's why I'm really excited that you're having a Mississauga made here approach to the things that you do. And I really look forward to working with you. As I said, I have a number of colleagues in your area, and I've made the commitment to go back there, not only to support them, but certainly the cultural, sports, leisure, recreation, and heritage assets that are within the city of Mississauga. And we certainly all know what a great sport hosting city Mississauga is. And so we want to make sure that as we eye recovery, that you're part of that plans. And so thank you very much. I'm happy to take as many questions as are possible and look forward to hearing from everyone. So thank you very much, Brad.
Well, thank you very much, Minister, for joining us today. I can hardly imagine what your schedules have been like. You were always busy pre-pandemic, and I could just imagine what the last 15 months of your life has been, being the minister of clearly what's been one of the most hardest hit sectors of our economy. And as you mentioned, unfortunately, looking like one of the last to fully recover, and there's all kinds of challenges in that. So you have been very generous with your time. You've given us a few moments to ask a few questions of you. So you did come and visit us, as you well said. You were one of the last in-person visits that the Mississauga Board of Trade hosted back in March of 2020. You came and you provided some information on what the government of Ontario was doing at the time around your tourism strategy and other things you were doing to promote heritage sport, culture, and tourism in Ontario. Obviously a lot has changed since that event. So you mind sharing an update with us on some of the milestones that have been made and what you feel that means for Mississauga this summer?
Yeah, I think, we're now into a third wave, and hopefully, God willing, if there is a fourth, it won't impact us as much as the previous 3 waves. But we want to be in a position, and I think there have been a number of lessons learned, both here in Ontario, but throughout the entire pandemic globally, on how we can best get people back into moving around and doing things. Certainly, I suspect when we announce our Reconnect Festival and Event Program funding this year that Mississauga will feature prominently there. I think that we've got some pretty incredible events that we've been able to fund throughout the years in Mississauga, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that. I think the other thing is we recognize how important it is for us to support the hyperlocal initiatives. And I think when Victoria started to made in Mississauga, the pride of people, pride of place, and pride of product is something that we're going to have to continue to advance. And that's certainly something that we're looking at within the ministry, is how do we start to take all of those made in Ontario products and really place them prominently. And so we've got to, through the I'm going to scoop myself in the 5-year plan, but one of the things that we're looking at is working with the Tourism Culinary Alliance of Ontario, as well as our craft distilleries, breweries, cideries, and wineries, to see how we can amplify that product. Similarly, we're working with the various playhouse groups across the theaters across Ontario to see how we can build a strategy out there, whether it's large like Stratford and Shaw, or small like Ottawa's Little Theatre. How do we get them engaged? And similarly with the Heritage Trail, with our Ontario Heritage Trust, how do we get to know more about who we are as Ontarians and talk about the pride that we have in our diversity, but at the same time have that authentic local product that we didn't really have. So we've taken that time throughout this process to really look at what hyper-local means, so that when we're eventually able to move beyond hyper-local tourism and staycations, that it will be really attractive for those around the world to come and experience something that they can only experience here in the province of Ontario. And so that's one of the things that we've been doing. I think throughout the pandemic, one of the things I can say about my sectors that I oversee is the incredible resiliency, their ability to pivot, their creativity and ingenuity. And so I've been very impressed with all of that, whether that was all of the music execs in Toronto getting together and creating something called musictogether.ca, and us investing a little bit of money into that, so that musicians could perform from the safety of their own home while still getting some liquidity into the back pocket. Whether it was us transitioning the Festival and Events Fund from Celebrate Ontario to Reconnect, and creating drive-in, drive-through theaters, as well as online and virtual events. Whether that was looking at the music scene and saying, okay, recognizing right now that you can't have concerts, but here let's look at some of those folks who need some support with mental health. That was one. And then finally, last summer, I did an 11-week tour across Ontario to help restore confidence. And we were able to get $14 million out the door to all of our regional tourism organizations in order for them to continue to develop hyper-local activity and encourage people to look at what's in their own backyard. So there's so much I think that we've been able to achieve together, and I'm grateful that Premier Ford on Friday decided that I still have more work to do in this portfolio. And really, I think I was begging him for the past month to say, keep me here, because I love this place so much. Despite all of the challenges, there's a lot of opportunities as we look over the next couple of months, and then outward 5 years.
So we know that when the government announced its reopening plan, it created the new step 1, step 2, step 3 approach. There are certain milestones that have to be met for the province to move into the next steps as time goes along. And again, the sectors that you represent have been the most severely impacted over the last 15 months, and lots of people are itching to get back at it, so to speak, have their businesses completely reopened. You want to share a little bit more about what we need to do to get there, what we need to do to get into these next stages, so that we can get back to almost what most people would say is a full reopening? And what are you doing to support those businesses in the meantime?
Yeah, so, let's talk a little bit about the health conditions. I'm not the health minister, but one of the things that I had been advocating for as the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries was a roadmap to reopening. If you think about the water parks, theme parks, they have been closed for close to 500 days now. And so they needed some level of certainty and criteria and thresholds. Similarly, we've got a number of professional sport organizations and professional performance arts, visual arts, ballets, that sort of thing, and wondering, what is their threshold, not only to start their performances again or their games again, but then what does it look like to get fans in stands? So that work is ongoing behind the scenes at the Jobs and Recovery Committee, as well as with the health table. So we're always guided by Dr. David Williams. This step-by-step approach is something that we've supported in the ministry, given it provides us with certainty once we get the regulations in place, which I suspect for step 2 will be forthcoming. But as you know, with the cabinet shuffle, a few things were a bit delayed. And so I think, we're always going to continue to look at the vaccination rates. We're going to look at the numbers of COVID cases across the province. We're going to look at the hospitalization rate as well as the ICU rate. And as we start to look at that, issues are more relieved so that there's not as much pressure on our hospitals, and we're able to slowly and gradually reopen over 21-day increments. And so I'm excited in step 2, we're going to start to see a broader return to play across Ontario with respect to non-combat sports. We're going to start to see rules relaxed for our restaurants so that they can have a greater degree of folks coming in. By step 3, our museums and our galleries, anything that's indoors, will start to be reopened, which is important for all of us, as well as making sure that we have a greater degree of return to sports during that time. In the interim, I think it's safe to say that people would be encouraged to stay closer to home for their travel, but there's all kinds of things that you can explore and experience in your own communities. So we'll have more to say about how we will incentivize folks. Next year, obviously, we'll be in a position where the $150 million travel incentive will be able to be rolled out, but we're looking at other opportunities in the interim where we would be encouraging people to stay closer to their own neighborhoods, closer to their own cities, closer to their own regions, so that we can contain the spread of COVID-19. But I'm certainly very hopeful that I'll be soon able to get a haircut. And I know there's probably many people there as well that are listening today that are excited about that prospect as well. But I think that we're on the right track. The weather has been good, which helps, and people continue to obey the rules. So we'll continue work behind the scenes with the Ministry of Health and expressing our concerns for our sectors, and at the same time making sure that we relieve pressure through various different grants. So the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade and Job Creation has $100 million tourism small business grant. We have $100 million that we're putting into a recovery program as well. And then there's other areas where we're going to continue to flow our cash as quickly as possible to make sure that there's certainty for example, our community museums, our local art galleries, our provincial sport organizations, and others like that.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you mentioned haircuts are on their way, because as everybody can clearly tell from my hair, it hasn't been cut since November 15th of 2020. And I refuse to go and get it cut until such time as my local barber in Streetsville is allowed to reopen, because I support small business just like everybody else that's on the line joining us today. If you got a few minutes to just tell us a little bit more about the Ontario Travel and Tourism Support Grant. The Chamber of Commerce Network was very instrumental in working with your government on the original Ontario small business support grant. It wound up eventually going up to as much as $40,000 for qualifying businesses. And it was a good program. I don't know as much about this one. I'm not sure it's your ministry that directly leads this, but I know we've got a few people on the line that are just interested in some more details about how that grant works et cetera, because I know June 25th is the cutoff to apply for that. So can you share any more advice on that particular program and how it works?
Yeah, so the Ontario Travel and Tourism Small Business Grant will provide an estimated $100 million in one-time payments of 10,000 to 20,000 eligible small businesses. Applications, as you said, are due on the 25th of June. this year. This is not being administered by our ministry. It's being administered by the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. And it was the policy decisions were set by the Ministry of Finance as well as the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, with the intent to find those who fell through the cracks with the previous grant an ability and a landing. So again, while it is labeled travel and tourism and it does support most of our sectors, the grant doesn't actually is not administered through our ministry. We will do the stakeholdering for those who are aligned with our ministry, but I understand that there's a lot of questions about it. So I'd certainly redirect folks to the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services or MedCat in order to find out if they are eligible or not.
So we had a quasi announcement by our federal friends today about border reopening. I'm sure you hear this all the time from your stakeholders, how important American tourism is to the province of Ontario. It doesn't look like we got a real reopening today in the announcement. And so it doesn't look like we got a real reopening today. But we're inching possibly towards one. What kind of interaction have you had with your federal cousins on this? How important is reopening the border to Ontario and to tourism? And do you have any idea when we might actually see some more significant action on that?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. That's an important question because you wear two hats on this one, right? You want to support your tourism industry, but at the same time, you want to prevent those covariants from coming in, particularly the most dangerous strains like the Delta right now, because the longer that this lasts, the more difficult it becomes on all of our small businesses. So we do speak regularly. I speak almost weekly with Stephen Guilbeault, who is our minister responsible for heritage, culture, and sport. And I also speak on a regular basis with Melanie Joly, who is the minister responsible for economic development and tourism. And so we work together on a variety of different things. Sometimes it's to try and land film and television production. Other times it's to talk about the border. Other times it's to make sure that the right level of support from the federal government is flowing through to the provincial government and letting them know where we're at on that. The difficult thing, I think, and I just want to be completely realistic about the border at the moment, is we still have a deadly variant and a deadly pandemic out there. And so one of the things that we have been really focused on, recognizing the healthcare challenges, is the fact that this ministry must be prepared for what I would consider hyper-local tourism, which is, someone from Mississauga heading down to Niagara, somebody from Ottawa visiting Mississauga, somebody from Brampton coming in and taking in an attraction in the Mississauga, and really focused on that. And that's why we're looking at different incentive programs between at the moment to try and get people reconnecting in Ontario, and looking at that as an opportunity to get to know your province a little bit better and your community a little bit better, and reconnecting with what's happening in your backyard. But then two, preparing our tourism attractions, our cultural attractions, and our sport and leisure organizations for what a full economic recovery will look like, and to allow them to pivot and adapt over the longer term. So there is no easy answer here. I think until the pandemic is over, and provided that hasn't happened in a while, I think that we're really looking at a 5-year to 10-year recovery. And I think that right now, the prudent thing for us to do is to plan for people to get to remember or remind themselves of why they love to live where they do.
I think a lot of people think tourism and travel is just kind of the nice thing to do. They forget about the economic multiplier of all of this. They forget about how significant it is for businesses and for job creation and job retention in a number of these industries. Tourism is a huge economic driver in the city of Mississauga. It's going to get even greater because we've now got our own DMO that's focused on doing this stuff, obviously mid and longer term as we get out of the pandemic. So as Canada's 6th largest city, we certainly have an abundance of offerings for both business and leisure tourism. I know that your ministry has been focusing on a number of initiatives to support this sector in particular. You able to provide us any further updates on some of these items?
Yeah, and like this is an excellent question. I mean, first, Mississauga, don't sell yourself short. You're home to the largest international airport in the country and one of the largest in North America. So obviously, as we look and prepare for economic recovery, Mississauga is going to be really important for a couple of reasons. First, people think of leisure and fun. Fair, you should when you talk about tourism, but you should also think about business tourism and what that means to your local economy, particularly that strip up by the airport, and what that brings to your community and to the broader GTA. And so one of the things that we talked about when we look at our gateway cities and we talk about how do we restore travel into our two largest markets, which will be Ottawa and of course the GTA, is looking at two things. One is business travel, and how do we compete for conventions around the world and land them back in Mississauga and Toronto and Ottawa. And then the second thing is making sure that we're focused on sport hosting. So we're looking at a FIFA World Cup, so that we're looking at the Commonwealth Games. So we're looking at all of these major events that bring people. And so we're going to be highly competitive in Toronto and Ontario in particular. The next thing is you said something that people don't realize. I don't think people didn't realize until SARS, and they certainly didn't realize until now, how impactful the sectors that we represent are. So I always say we have a spectacular double bottom line. On the one hand, what we love about being Canadians is in this ministry. It's watching Team Canada, regardless of which sport it is, on television and getting either a gold medal or defeating, our biggest rival. It's listening to an Alessia Cara or a Justin Bieber or a Shawn Mendes or an Alanis Morissette or whomever from Ontario on that world stage when they're topping charts. It's when we watch Schitt's Creek and they're getting all of these awards and it's made here. And so that cultural fabric, that sense of pride, why we love where we live, and that thing that makes us stand up and go, yeah, that's a feeling. And so we promote feelings, we promote emotion, we promote memories in this ministry. The thing that people didn't realize, however, I think until the pandemic hit, and particularly it's lasted this long, is how significant of a contributor to the economy we are. And so when I say spectacular double bottom line, you've got that social impact or the cultural fabric, which includes sort of your largest volunteer sector in the country, but also that je ne sais quoi, what does it make, that part of identity, the cultural identity part that we have. But then you've got $75 billion in economic activity. You've got $35 billion in tourism, representing in our GDP, 26 billion for our culture industries and our creative sectors, and 12.6 for our sports and recreation, including professional sports. So you're looking at, again, about $75 to $76 billion in economic activity, over 500,000 jobs directly related to these sectors. You're looking at a GDP that is larger than the GDP of Manitoba and larger than forestry, mining, and agriculture in Ontario put together. And it's larger than some smaller countries in the world. So, the fact that this has lasted longer and deeper than SARS, 9/11, and the global economic recession, I think has really given people pause to say, okay, the banquet halls, the wedding planners, the kids sports leagues, the tournaments that come because of kids sports leagues, our Toronto Blue Jays right behind me, our art galleries, our museums, they're all part of an ecosystem that reminds us of who we are and basically how we generate economic activity within our province.
So maybe you want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of our professional sports teams and what's happening now and how it's looking like people are going to be able to start to go back and watch some events in person. We sort of saw a little bit of that with that one Toronto Maple Leaf game, and where a few hundred fans were allowed to go. Of course, we won't talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs this year, although it's the same as every year.
They did a little bit better than my Senators, so there
Well,
you go.
at least the Maple Leafs made the playoffs. But I mean, I'm not gonna dump on the Ottawa Senators today either, Minister. Because we're out too. But when those kinds of decisions are made, and when we get back to people being able to go out and support these events and go to these events they want to go to, not just the international travel with the athletes and the teams back and forth, that's one thing, but people being able to get back in these congregate settings again and be able to enjoy some of these things in person. Do you have any idea when we might start to see some of that, and how we can get back to some sense of normalcy for being able to go and watch maybe even the Blue Jays getting back soon to be able to play games in Toronto again? We know they're in Buffalo now, and we're in Dunedin before that. Any sense of that, and where, because people are, as you know, they want to get back to these things. They enjoy these things. These things are important. And they're also great for tourism, because people come to watch these events from outside of the Greater Toronto area, which drives tourism into our communities.
Yeah, so we've had a number of, I think, successes. As much as everybody, I think, wishes this didn't happen. We were the first in North America to get our high performance athletes up and ready to go almost immediately last April, May, so that our Olympians that are going to Tokyo could be ready to go. Thanks to the NBA, I mean, they were the first group to sort of shut down, but because of the Toronto Raptors, we had a better line of sight than any other jurisdiction in Canada on how to get our professional athletes back into training facilities, and we were able to do that. We had great success, I think, with the NHL bubble, and then working with the Senators and the Leafs, we were able to create that Canadian division, which I thought was really important. Last week, we announced an accelerated return to play for our professional sports organizations like the Blue Jays and the Raptors to come back home if the federal government allows them to cross the border, as well as a number of others like the OHL. So I think that's important. The regulations will be coming out. They're a bit delayed as a result of the cabinet shuffle, but we're getting to that point. When we get to steps 2 and step 3, I suspect you're going to start to see broader return to play, not just for professional, but definitely for amateur and minor sports. And then I think we start to look at what fans and stands looks like. And I don't think it's unreasonable to start looking at what the capacity is in our restaurants, or what it would look like for our tour boat operators, our amusement parks, our retail, and start applying that. The difficulty, of course, is right now we're really focused on what outdoor activity will look like, as opposed to what indoor activity looks like. So, all things being equal, our case counts keep going down, inoculations still continue to rise, and, we're accelerating the inoculations at the moment. So that's been fairly positive. Making sure that the hospital capacity and ICU rates are down. We get every 21 days, I think, closer to what that looks like. And so I would just add on this one, while we're looking at what a return to fans and stands looks like for sport, we're also at the same time doing that work for the Canadian live music scene, as well as any other performance arts that we would be looking at, because that's absolutely incredibly important for us that we consistently do it. I can share with you, over the weekend, I have spoken with MLSE, as well as the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, which owns the Ottawa Red Blacks and 67s, on what a return to fans and stands look like. Can I give you a specific date? No, I don't have clearance at the moment from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, but I can say that I'm very optimistic that the plans that we're bringing before the Jobs and Recovery Committee of Cabinet, and then ultimately to the Chief Medical Officer of Health, has been reviewed, and I think that we're starting to get somewhere on that. But there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes.
So we've got a question here, which I think is a very interesting one. I think you'll like this one. With skilled labor migration out of the live music industry, what is your ministry's plan to help music-centric organizations fill that gap when live events are allowed to start again? A lack of skilled technicians may actually lead to a de facto shutdown even after reopening is permitted. I realize that's not directly your ministry. That might be more Minister McNaughton, but I know you care about that sector and you spend a lot of time, working with the music and entertainment industry on their needs. So what would you have to say about
And,
that?
Minister McNaughton will tell you this, anytime he gets money, I claim it as my own, because it's going to be our sectors that are going to be getting a lot of the retraining. And I tell him that, I'm very honest about it. So I did see when we were able to get that $1 billion in terms of skilled retraining in the last budget, a lot of that will go to the live music sector in Canada. It will go to some of the creative sectors, as well as to some of our sports organizations and others. So really thrilled about that. I think it's fantastic that the government's thinking that way. It also speaks to the fact that we're taking a whole of government approach. I work with all of my colleagues because we're so central to each one of their ridings, but there's so many overlapping that's going on here. And I think that there's going to be a tremendous opportunity. And I will say this, I really think so. Vic Fideli and I often talk, and I said to him one day, your sectors, Vic, in the economy are like your first name of your letter, like first letter of your name, V. So his sectors in manufacturing took a steep decline, but then they took, when we started to open up, a sharp increase. Mine's more like the first letter of my name, Lisa. My sectors, boom. And we're fighting like heck to go like this, to level them out. And so it's incumbent upon everyone, I think, in the whole of government to try and help us level out so we get to that B. And part of the getting to that B, by the way, is where we're really going to start to see the economy grow again, because otherwise it's going to be stagnated and it's just going to be the same old sectors that have rebounded, maybe creating more jobs, but then there's a whole segment out there. And so when you're looking at the Canadian live music sector, when you're looking at music production in general, there are a lot of jobs there. And I often remind people, and you can look back at many of my tweets, I often say, whether it's film and television, music, whether it's interactive and digital gaming, the creative sectors need as many skilled trades as anywhere else. It's really incredibly important that they have people behind the scenes that are doing the electrical work. They're doing they're creating the sets, they're building the sets, all of that type of work is really critically important. And that's why it's important for us to continue to invest in them and make sure that we actually have the skilled. And I'll just move over to film and TV for once as well, because I think one of the cool things that we have at our advantage, we have a lot of on-screen talent in Canada. We have a lot of writers that are really good, a lot of directors, but just as much as that, we have people behind the scenes that are in the skilled trades that are making sure that when an American production wants to come to Canada, that we actually are crew ready. And that's really important. And I want us to be known as the most skilled place to do work in the creative sectors in North America. And so we're going to continue to work on that. And that's why our partnership with the Ministry of Labor, Skills Development and Training, where Minister McNaughton's area, is so critical.
Another good question here. Do you see the Ontario government requiring vaccine passports for attending public events like concerts and theater and all that in the future? I know there's been conversations among the premiers and the prime minister as to what that might look like. But do you envision that?
I would see that more of a federal matter if they look at vaccine passports. And I certainly think that you might actually start to see some industry doing that. I don't know if that's the role of the provinces. I think that'd be hard to deal with in terms of consistency's sake. So I think it would be more or less a federal matter. I think that many of us have traveled abroad over the years and have had to show proof of vaccine going into another country. So I certainly think those conversations are ongoing, but I don't see that being a provincial level. At least those discussions haven't occurred at the state.
Okay, listen, thank you very much, Minister. I'm going to pass it over to our CEO, David Wojcik, for some closing remarks and the thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hello, Minister. I had the pleasure of doing the Q&A the last time you were with us, and certainly you had a much more abled individual, much more informed individual this time in our Vice President, Brad Butt. But great to see you, Minister. Thank you so much for joining us today. Such an important sector, as you've pointed out on a number of items. As you know, we have been advocating for this sector right from the very beginning. You made a reference to a couple of very important economic models I noticed there with the V shape and the L shape. And of course, with economic models, it's very easy to shut an economy down. You just flip the switch and you shut it down. much different situation to bring it back online, as you well know, especially in your particular area in tourism. So as we advocate for your colleagues at the provincial level, and we have your colleague Minister Fideli coming up on Wednesday, so we'll be chatting with him about keeping that economic stimulus going. And I know that you'll help us at the federal level, because this tourism sector is going to need help for many years to come as it continues to recover. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for being the advocate of such an important sector. And thanks for being with us today so you could welcome our great new CEO at Mississauga Tourism, Victoria Clark. We are so excited to have her here with us, bringing that East Coast hospitality and injecting that into the Mississauga tourism. So on that note, Minister, I'm going to just run through a couple of events that we do have coming up. As I mentioned, the virtual town hall with the Honorable Victor Fideli, Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, is on Wednesday, June 23rd. On June 25th, we have a virtual town hall with the Honorable Aaron O'Toole, Leader of Canada's Conservatives and Leader of the Official Opposition. On June 29th, right back to one of your colleagues, a virtual town hall with the Honorable Jeff Urick. And on July 12th, please everyone join us for our annual Golf Classic 9 Dine and Network. We celebrate our 60th anniversary. July 11th, 1961 was the formation of the Mississauga Board of Trade, then known as the Clarkson and Lauren Park Chamber of Commerce. Join us, mbot.com events to get your tickets. Minister, as you can see, I get all choked up when I talk about our golf tournament. With that, I want to thank you for being with us. Thanks to everyone for being with us today. Thanks to Brad for doing such a great job. And we wish you continued success in your business.